Right before your life changes for the better, everything starts to fall apart. And that's not a coincidence. There is a quiet pattern in life that most people don't recognize until much later, often when they look back and connect the dots. It is the pattern of things falling apart just before they come together in a more meaningful way. In the moment, it rarely feels like a setup for something better. It feels like loss, like confusion, like a series of unfortunate events that seem to strip away stability piece by piece. Plans stop working, relationships shift or dissolve, motivation weakens, and clarity disappears. What once felt certain becomes fragile, and what once felt easy becomes heavy. This phase can be deeply unsettling because it challenges your sense of control, and human beings naturally seek stability and predictability. When that foundation begins to shake, the instinct is to fix, to restore, to go back to what was familiar, even if that familiarity was limiting or no longer aligned with who you are becoming. But a breakdown is not simply destruction, it is often a reorganization that you cannot yet see. It dismantles structures that can no longer support your growth. Think about how tightly we hold on to identities, roles, habits, and expectations even when they no longer fit. A breakdown interrupts that attachment. It forces you to confront what is no longer sustainable, what is no longer true, and what is no longer contributing to your evolution. Without that disruption, it is easy to remain in situations that feel comfortable but quietly restrict your potential. The breakdown acts as a kind of interruption, pulling you out of autopilot and placing you in a space where reflection becomes unavoidable. It removes the illusion that everything is fine and invites you to look deeper, even when that process is uncomfortable. This stage is also where emotional intensity rises. Doubt, frustration, and even fear can become more present because the usual anchors are no longer there to provide reassurance. You may begin to question your decisions, your direction, or even your sense of self. That questioning, while painful, is also where awareness begins to expand. It is in these moments that you start to see patterns you previously ignored, recognize truths you once avoided, and consider possibilities you had not allowed yourself to explore. The discomfort is not random, it is closely tied to the expansion that is trying to occur. Growth demands space, and that space is often created by removing what is outdated or misaligned. Breakdowns also tend to reveal resilience that you may not have realized you possessed. When everything feels stable, strength remains hidden because it is not required. It is only when challenges arise that inner capacity begins to surface. You learn how to adapt, how to endure uncertainty, how to make decisions without complete information, and how to continue moving forward even when the path is unclear. These are not small developments. They are fundamental shifts in how you relate to life itself. The person who emerges from a breakdown is not the same person who entered it, even if the external circumstances appear similar. Another important aspect of this phase is that it disrupts illusions. Sometimes what falls apart was never as solid as it seemed. It may have been built on expectations, assumptions, or external validation rather than genuine alignment. When those illusions break, it can feel like everything is collapsing, but in reality, it is the clearing away of what was never fully real or sustainable. This clearing is necessary for something more authentic to take its place, something that is built on a deeper understanding of who you are and what you truly need. The difficulty lies in recognizing this process while you are inside it. When you are in the middle of a breakdown, it rarely feels purposeful. It feels chaotic and undesired. The mind looks for immediate solutions, quick fixes, or ways to return to a previous state of comfort. But the breakthrough does not come from restoring the old structure. It comes from allowing a new one to form. That formation takes time, patience, and a willingness to sit with uncertainty without rushing to escape it. It requires trusting that there is meaning in the disruption even when that meaning is not yet visible, and allowing the process to unfold without forcing it into a familiar shape. There comes a point in life when the version of you that once felt natural begins to feel unfamiliar, almost like a suit you have worn for too long. At first, the discomfort is subtle. You may notice a lack of excitement in things that once energized you, or a quiet resistance toward routines that used to feel effortless. Conversations that once felt engaging may begin to feel repetitive or empty. The goals you once chased with determination may no longer inspire the same drive. This shift can be confusing because nothing external has necessarily changed in a dramatic way, yet internally something feels different. It is as if a part of you has moved forward while the rest of your life remains in the same place, creating a tension that is difficult to explain but impossible to ignore. Outgrowing your old self is not a sudden transformation, it is a gradual unfolding. It happens as you gain new perspectives, as your experiences reshape your understanding, and as your awareness deepens over time. What once made sense begins to lose its meaning, not because it was wrong, but because it belonged to a previous stage of your life. Growth has a way of making old patterns feel restrictive, even if they once felt safe. The challenge is that familiarity often disguises itself as security. You may find yourself holding on to habits, relationships, or identities simply because they are known to you, even when they no longer align with who you are becoming. This process often brings an internal conflict. One part of you wants to evolve, to explore new directions, to step into something more aligned with your current self. Another part wants to hold on, to preserve what is comfortable and predictable. This tension can create feelings of guilt or uncertainty. You may question whether you are being ungrateful for what you have, or whether you are making unnecessary changes. It is important to understand that outgrowing something does not mean it was a mistake. It means it served its purpose at a certain time in your life, and now you are being called to expand beyond it. As you begin to outgrow your old self, you may also experience a sense of isolation. The people who once understood you may not fully relate to the person you are becoming. Your interests may shift, your priorities may change, and your way of seeing the world may evolve in ways that others around you do not share. This can create a feeling of distance, even in familiar environments. It is not always a dramatic separation. Sometimes it is a quiet realization that you no longer fit into the same spaces in the same way. This realization can be uncomfortable, but it is also a sign that your growth is real and significant. Another aspect of this transformation is the need to redefine your identity. For a long time, you may have defined yourself through roles, achievements, or external validation. As you outgrow your old self, those definitions begin to lose their clarity. You are no longer fully who you used to be, but you may not yet know who you are becoming. This in-between state can feel uncertain, as if you are standing between two versions of yourself without a clear sense of direction. However, this space is not empty, it is full of potential. It is where you begin to discover what truly resonates with you, independent of past expectations or external pressures. Letting go of your old self requires courage because it involves releasing parts of your identity that once felt essential. It may involve changing the way you see yourself, the way you interact with others, and the way you approach your life. This is not always easy, especially when those changes are not immediately understood or accepted by others. But growth is not about maintaining the same version of yourself to meet external expectations. It is about allowing yourself to evolve in a way that feels authentic and aligned with your deeper understanding. As this process unfolds, you begin to notice subtle shifts in how you respond to life. You may become more aware of what drains your energy and what nourishes it. you may feel a stronger pull toward experiences that reflect your evolving values. Decisions that once felt complicated may become clearer because you are no longer trying to fit into an outdated version of yourself. This clarity does not come from having all the answers, but from being more connected to your inner sense of direction. One of the most difficult truths to accept is that holding on can quietly prevent new things from entering your life. We are often taught to value persistence, loyalty, and endurance, and these qualities can be powerful when applied with awareness. But there is a difference between commitment and attachment. Commitment supports growth, while attachment can sometimes keep you bound to what no longer serves you. Letting go is not about giving up care or meaning. It is about recognizing when something has fulfilled its role and allowing yourself to move forward without carrying unnecessary weight. This recognition does not arrive easily because what we hold on to is often tied to identity, memory, or the comfort of familiarity. The idea of creating space may sound simple, but in practice, it can feel unsettling. Space is quiet, and quiet often brings you face to face with your own thoughts and emotions. When something leaves your life, whether it is a relationship, a goal, a routine, or even a belief, it creates an absence that can feel uncomfortable. Many people rush to fill that absence immediately, seeking distraction or replacement to avoid the discomfort of emptiness. However, that space has a purpose. It is not meant to be filled instantly. It is meant to be experienced. It allows you to process what has ended, to understand what you have learned, and to reconnect with yourself without the noise of what used to be there. Letting go also challenges the illusion of control. We often believe that by holding on tightly, we can maintain stability and prevent change. In reality, life is constantly moving, and trying to control that movement can create tension and resistance. When you let go, you are not losing control in a negative sense. You are releasing the need to force outcomes that are no longer aligned with your path. This shift requires trust, not in a specific result, but in the process of growth itself. It involves accepting that not everything is meant to stay, and that departure is sometimes necessary for evolution. There is also an emotional layer to this process that cannot be ignored. Letting go can bring feelings of sadness, regret, or even fear. You may question whether you are making the right decision or wonder what could have been if you had held on longer. These feelings are natural because letting go often means closing a chapter that once held meaning and significance. It is important to allow those emotions to exist without letting them dictate your actions. Emotions are part of the experience, but they are not always a reflection of what is best for your future. They represent the connection you had, not necessarily the direction you need to continue in. Another aspect of creating space is the opportunity it provides for clarity. When you are no longer surrounded by what no longer aligns with you, your perspective begins to shift. You start to see yourself and your life with greater honesty. Without the influence of outdated patterns or expectations, it becomes easier to recognize what truly matters to you. This clarity is not something that can be forced. It emerges naturally when there is room for it. By letting go, you are not just removing something from your life. You are making space for insight, for growth, and for new possibilities to take shape. This process also reshapes your relationship with value. Instead of measuring worth based on how long you can hold on to something, you begin to understand value in terms of alignment and purpose. Something can be valuable and still be something you need to release. Its value lies in what it taught you, how it shaped you, and the role it played in your journey. Holding on to it beyond its time does not increase its value. It can diminish your ability to grow. Recognizing this allows you to appreciate what was without feeling the need to preserve it indefinitely. As you become more comfortable with letting go, you begin to notice a shift in how you approach life. You become less afraid of change because you understand that endings are not simply losses, they are transitions. You start to trust that what leaves creates room for what is meant to arrive, even if you cannot yet see what that will be. This trust does not eliminate uncertainty, but it changes your relationship with it. Instead of resisting the unknown, you begin to see it as a space of possibility rather than something to be feared. Uncertainty is one of the most uncomfortable experiences for the human mind because it removes the illusion of control. When you are certain, even if the situation is not ideal, there is a sense of stability that allows you to plan, predict, and emotionally prepare. But uncertainty removes that structure. It places you in a space where answers are not immediate, outcomes are not visible, and direction is not fully defined. In that space, the mind naturally begins to search for certainty again, trying to reconstruct a sense of order even when none is available. This is where most people feel the urge to rush decisions, return to familiar paths, or cling to anything that provides temporary reassurance. Yet uncertainty is not a flaw in the process of life. It is often the very condition through which transformation becomes possible. When certainty dissolves, awareness begins to expand in ways that are not accessible when everything feels predictable. In predictable environments, people tend to operate on autopilot, relying on established patterns and familiar responses. Uncertainty interrupts that autopilot. It forces attention into the present moment because the future cannot be clearly mapped. This heightened awareness may feel unsettling at first, but it also opens the door to deeper perception. You begin to notice details about yourself, your decisions, and your environment that were previously overlooked. You become more conscious of your reactions, your assumptions, and your emotional responses. This level of awareness is often the beginning of meaningful internal change. Uncertainty also challenges the need for immediate answers. There is a natural discomfort in not knowing what comes next, and that discomfort often creates pressure to resolve things quickly. However, not all questions are meant to be answered instantly. Some require time, experience, and reflection before clarity emerges. When you remain in uncertainty without forcing premature conclusions, you allow space for deeper understanding to develop. This process can feel slow and frustrating, but it often leads to insights that are more aligned and more lasting than those formed under pressure. Growth rarely happens in a straight line. It unfolds gradually, often in moments of confusion that only make sense in hindsight. Another important aspect of uncertainty is that it reveals your relationship with fear. When the future is unknown, fear tends to surface more strongly because the mind tries to anticipate potential risks and outcomes. This fear is not necessarily a signal that something is wrong. It is often a reflection of stepping outside familiar boundaries. Growth requires movement beyond what is already known, and anything beyond the known naturally triggers resistance. The presence of fear, therefore, is not a sign of failure, but an indicator that you are entering unfamiliar territory where expansion becomes possible. How you respond to that fear shapes the direction of your development. In uncertain periods, identity also becomes less fixed. The roles, labels, and expectations that once defined you may no longer feel as stable. This can create a sense of disorientation, as if the structure of who you are is temporarily suspended. Yet this suspension is not a loss, it is an opening. When identity is not rigidly defined by past experiences or external expectations, there is space for something new to emerge. You are no longer limited by what you have always been, and this allows exploration of what you might become. Uncertainty dissolves fixed definitions and invites flexibility in how you see yourself. There is also a hidden strength that develops through prolonged exposure to uncertainty. As you learn to remain steady without immediate clarity, your emotional resilience begins to deepen. You start to understand that discomfort does not necessarily require escape, and that not knowing does not equal failure. You become more capable of holding space for complexity without needing to simplify it prematurely. This ability to stay present in ambiguity strengthens your capacity to navigate future challenges with greater stability and calmness. Over time, uncertainty begins to shift from something threatening into something that carries potential. Instead of being seen as a void that needs to be filled, it becomes a space where new possibilities can emerge. The absence of predefined outcomes creates room for experiences that could not have been planned or predicted. This openness allows life to unfold in ways that are not restricted by expectation. What initially feels like instability gradually reveals itself as a necessary condition for change, where the familiar structures of thought and identity loosen enough for something new to take shape. Pain is one of the most misunderstood experiences in human life because it is almost always interpreted through the lens of resistance. When something hurts, the immediate assumption is that something has gone wrong, that something should be fixed, avoided, or eliminated as quickly as possible. This reaction is natural, but it often prevents a deeper understanding of what pain is actually doing beneath the surface. Pain is not simply an interruption of comfort, it is a signal that something within you is being reorganized, stretched, or brought into awareness. It often arrives at moments when growth is happening in directions that are not yet fully understood. And because growth rarely feels comfortable while it is occurring, pain becomes the language through which change is communicated. When life places you in situations that feel difficult or overwhelming, it is easy to interpret those moments as personal failure or external injustice. Yet pain often emerges not because you are being punished, but because you are being prepared for a level of emotional, psychological, or even spiritual capacity that you did not previously need. Preparation is rarely gentle because it involves dismantling old patterns, challenging established beliefs, and confronting truths that may have been avoided. This dismantling process creates friction, and that friction is experienced as pain. However, without this friction, transformation remains superficial. Deep change requires contact with resistance, and resistance is what makes the process feel intense and sometimes overwhelming. Pain also reveals areas of life that were previously ignored or underdeveloped. When everything is comfortable, it is easy to overlook internal imbalances, unresolved emotions, or limiting patterns of thought. Comfort creates familiarity, and familiarity can sometimes hide stagnation. Pain disrupts that hiding. It draws attention to what needs to be acknowledged, whether it is an emotional wound, a relationship dynamic, a belief system, or a personal limitation. This confrontation is not meant to overwhelm, but to bring clarity. It forces awareness into places that were previously avoided, creating an opportunity for understanding that would not arise without disruption. Another important aspect of pain is that it develops resilience. Resilience is not created in moments of ease, it is formed in moments of challenge. When you move through difficult experiences, you begin to discover capacities within yourself that were not visible before. You learn how to endure discomfort without being consumed by it, how to navigate uncertainty without collapsing under it, and how to continue functioning even when emotional weight is present. These abilities do not appear instantly. They are built gradually through exposure to situations that require adaptation and endurance. Pain, in this sense, becomes a training ground for emotional strength and inner stability. Pain also has a way of reshaping priorities. What once seemed important may lose significance when viewed through the lens of suffering, while what was previously overlooked may become deeply meaningful. Relationships, values, goals, and daily choices are often reassessed during periods of difficulty. This reassessment is not forced, It happens naturally when external circumstances no longer support superficial concerns. Pain strips away distractions and brings focus to what truly matters, even if that clarity arrives through discomfort. In this way, it acts as a filter that refines perception and aligns attention with more essential aspects of life. There is also a transformative quality in how pain changes perception over time. What feels overwhelming in the present moment often becomes a source of understanding later. Experiences that once seemed unbearable can, with distance and reflection, reveal lessons, insights, and strengths that were not visible during the experience itself. This shift in perception does not minimize the difficulty of the moment. Rather, it highlights the hidden structure within it. Pain carries meaning that is not always accessible while it is being experienced, but becomes clearer as time allows for integration. Pain also plays a role in breaking internal limitations. Many personal boundaries are not physical, but psychological, formed through repetition, fear, or past experiences. When pain challenges those boundaries, it creates an opportunity to expand them. This expansion is not immediate or effortless. It requires engagement with discomfort and a willingness to move through uncertainty. As those boundaries stretch, a new sense of capacity begins to form, one that is often stronger and more flexible than before. The discomfort involved in this process is directly connected to the depth of transformation taking place. Trusting the process is one of the most difficult inner movements because it goes against the natural human desire for certainty, control, and immediate understanding. The mind prefers clarity, structure, and predictable outcomes, yet the process of growth rarely provides those comforts in real time. Instead, it unfolds in layers, often without revealing the full picture until much later. Trusting the process does not mean blindly accepting every circumstance without reflection. It means developing the capacity to remain engaged with life even when the direction is not fully visible. It is an active form of patience, one that requires emotional maturity rather than passive waiting. In moments of uncertainty, frustration often arises because there is a gap between where you are and where you believe you should be. That gap can feel like failure, even when it is actually part of development. The process rarely moves in a straight line. It involves pauses, detours, and repetitions that can appear meaningless in the moment. Yet those very movements often serve a deeper function that only becomes clear with time. Trusting the process means accepting that understanding does not always arrive immediately and that meaning is sometimes constructed retrospectively rather than discovered instantly. There is also a strong emotional component involved in trusting the process. When results are delayed or unclear, doubt begins to surface. You may question your decisions, your direction, or your ability to reach where you intend to go. This doubt is not necessarily a sign of being on the wrong path. It is often a natural response to being in a space where outcomes are not yet visible. Learning to sit with that doubt without allowing it to dictate your actions is part of developing inner stability. It requires separating temporary emotional states from long-term direction, recognizing that feelings are valid but not always predictive of reality. Trusting the process also involves releasing the need for immediate validation. Modern life often reinforces the expectation of quick results, instant feedback, and visible progress. When those expectations are not met, it can create a sense of stagnation or inadequacy. However, many forms of growth are invisible at first. Internal changes, shifts in perspective, and subtle adjustments in behavior often occur long before external results become apparent. These unseen developments form the foundation upon which visible progress is eventually built. Without this internal phase, external success tends to be unstable or short-lived. Another important aspect of trusting the process is understanding that discomfort is not a sign of misalignment by default. Growth often feels uncomfortable because it requires stepping beyond familiar patterns and known capacities. When you are expanding into something new, the unfamiliarity can create resistance, and that resistance can be mistaken for failure or wrong direction. However, discomfort is frequently a companion of expansion rather than an indicator of error. It signals that something within you is being stretched beyond its previous limits, creating space for new capabilities to emerge. Trust also develops through reflection on past experiences. Looking back at previous challenges often reveals that periods of confusion or difficulty eventually led to clarity, strength, or unexpected opportunities. This retrospective understanding builds a foundation for present trust. It does not eliminate current uncertainty, but it provides context that helps reframe it. You begin to recognize patterns in your own life where moments of uncertainty were later understood as necessary stages of development. This recognition does not remove difficulty, but it changes how difficulty is interpreted. There is also a deeper shift that occurs when trust becomes more internalized. Instead of relying solely on external signs to confirm direction, there is a gradual development of internal alignment. Decisions begin to feel less dependent on immediate outcomes and more connected to an inner sense of coherence. This does not mean certainty is always present, but it means there is a growing ability to move forward even in its absence. That movement becomes less about forcing outcomes and more about engaging with the unfolding of experience as it is. Trusting the process ultimately involves accepting that not everything is meant to be understood in the moment it is happening. Some experiences require time, distance, and perspective before their meaning becomes visible. The inability to see the full picture in real time is not a flaw in the journey. It is part of how growth unfolds. Remaining present within that unfolding, without rushing to conclude or escape it, becomes an essential part of navigating transformation as it continues to develop in ways that are not immediately apparent. There comes a point in every life where the struggle stops being about what is happening outside and starts becoming about how you are choosing to interpret it within. The breakdowns, the uncertainty, the letting go, the pain, and the invisible process of becoming all seem separate when you are inside them, but in truth, they are deeply connected movements of the same transformation. Nothing is random in the way life reshapes a person. What feels like loss is often redirection. What feels like delay is often preparation. What feels like confusion is often transition into a deeper level of understanding that cannot be rushed or forced into clarity. The human mind naturally resists these phases because they strip away familiarity, and familiarity is often mistaken for safety. But growth does not negotiate with comfort. It asks you to move even when the path is unclear, to release even when holding on feels safer, and to continue even when certainty is absent. In those moments, something quiet but powerful is being built within you, something that cannot be seen immediately but will eventually define how you move through life. What you become is rarely shaped in the moments when everything is working smoothly. It is shaped in the moments when nothing seems to be working at all, when patience is tested, when identity feels uncertain, and when direction is invisible. These are the spaces where inner strength is formed not as an idea, but as a lived experience. And over time, what once felt like disruption begins to reveal itself as direction, and what once felt like an ending begins to show itself as preparation for something you could not yet understand.